stop midway through because I don't have enough F memory. Yeah, I know. I can always cut this out. But we could include it and make it like a blooper reel. It's just me like Central Time today. Alright, well here we are with podcast episode 5, Conspiracies and Consciousness. I'm here with my good friend Ben in South Carolina, Greenville. Go Tigers.
That's right.
Ben went to Clemson, graduated in May, and we're going to a bar and hanging out. I'm going to see a game later on today, just visiting him in town. And, say a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you're going, and kind of what's going on with you these days.
Let's see. Well, I grew up in Maryland, and I went to Clemson, and now I'm trying to get into medical school. So I'm going to be an upstanding person in society.
There
so
you go.
when I'm running for Supreme Court Justice one day, this video is going to be played during my hearing.
Exactly, so keep it PC.
Uh-huh.
Alright, cool. Well, I think we want to start off a little bit because I guess more, would you consider it like a hobby, just something you like or kind of find interesting, so you research a little bit or look into kind of like different various conspiracy theories? Because I know we went on a cabin trip earlier in this year in July, and you put together this whole like presentation stuff about this whole 9/11 conspiracy thing and stuff too. And by the end of it, you kind of had me convinced a little bit, like, all right, this is a little sketchy. Like, what's going on with that? Is that something that you just kind of like fell into, or do you think it just like melds with your personality a little bit?
Yeah, well, I had probably about a month-long stretch in the summer of 2017 where I didn't really, I would go to work and I would eat and I wouldn't really leave my house. I would just kind of get stoned and watch YouTube videos.
Interesting. All right.
So I went down, I know more about 9/11 than any other conspiracy theory.
You want to play that out a little bit too, because I mean everybody's kind of here, like the traditional thing, jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams and whatnot. But I think like when you break it down, like percentage-wise, probably a lot of people believe certain things about that other people, like with the traditional narrative, would be like, oh, that's impossible, that can never happen.
Oh yeah, I remember when I was a kid, my dad went on an hour-long rant about how he sat on a plane next to some lady who thought it was Bush's fault, and he just couldn't believe it. But I was like, there's a lot of people out there like that.
Actually believe it, yeah.
And it's not just 9/11, it's true about the moon. I think, was it like 10% of the population isn't sure about the moon landing anymore?
Yeah, that's insane.
That's awesome, I'm all about it.
I mean, there's definitely a comedic element to it, but at the same time, like you said, people actually legitimately believe it, which I think kind of plays into, like, how would you necessarily define, like, a conspiracy or that kind of, like, mindset? Like, what kind of people do you think gravitate towards those kind of things as, like, actually being true, not just, like, find it fun or interesting?
Well, I think a lot of those people, they end up getting disillusioned with, our government, or they get disillusioned with just kind of American culture in general, or society. Not just America, it's true around the world.
Yeah.
But people just kind of get disillusioned with their authorities, and then they decide, a lot of people they kind of need, they wonder why, it kind of comes down to the question, why do bad things happen to good people? And for some people in their reality, the only way they can justify that is, oh, there's people out to get me, or there's people out to get good average people like us who are just trying to get by.
Yeah, there's definitely like an element, I guess, of obviously like paranoia and stuff like that, but too with people who tend to like exhibit those kind of personality traits. I feel like they definitely gravitate toward that.
Yeah, and if you go down the YouTube rabbit hole and you go pretty quickly from just individual theories about specific events to these whole 4-hour-long videos that explain everything's a rich man's game.
Yeah, like somebody put in all that time and effort, and were they doing it just for a couple laughs or some views, or were they doing it because they thought there was actually something?
Now it's like a unifying theory of your existence.
Yeah, or like the whole thing with like the flat earther theory for existence, which like made a comeback, 2,000 years after it was disproved, and there's actually like famous people and like really big community built around it who actually believe it when it's just obviously not the case. Mm-hmm. I just feel like it's like it's just something that really like takes hold and then grows and builds more and more roots, and then people just like propagate it in other ways, or there'll be like little diversions of it here or there and stuff like that too. But it's like kind of feels like cultish in a way, or almost like a religion for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, it comes down to kind of one principle where people get into this mindset where I'm not going to believe anything that I can't see with my own eyes. So once you get to that state, I mean, if you want to believe in a flat Earth, you say, okay, I go outside, the Earth looks flat. You hold a basketball. When I go outside, it doesn't look like this. So if all I believe is all I can see, I only believe stuff that I see right in front of my eyes, then that's it's extremely logical, but it's also extremely stupid at the same time.
It feels like, yeah, you're leaving out the possibility for other things too, as well. And I feel like it appeals to definitely people with a more imaginative, creative kind of mindset too. Like, oh, it could just be this. It could just be A to B, or it could just be like A and then all this other random stuff happens, and kind of too. So it makes it more fun in a way. It's like almost like fantasy literature, just kind of.
Like that guy in Arizona who built his own rocket so he could see if the Earth was really flat or not. Like that's ingenuity right there. That's the American spirit.
That is true.
He said, you know what? I don't believe this shit. I'm going to discover it for myself. And you know what? He didn't die, so good for him. He learned how to build his own rocket.
Yeah, like how many things do you think have been built off somebody thinking like, oh, this is going to happen when it really wasn't, and then like out of necessity or need or drive, they built a rocket or they made something that could
Christian
save
church.
people. Hey, you're not maybe that far off. All right. So I also want to say, can a conspiracy be true? So in that sense, like, well, I guess if we define it a little more narrowly, we could make sense of this question. But take things like even like Watergate and stuff like that too, which was like a conspiracy. It's like all these Republican people, Nixon and whatnot, conspiring against the Democrats, and then they get caught in unravels and stuff like that too. So I think they can be in a sense, but it also depends on how you define it, I guess, those particular situations.
Well, the traditional definition of a conspiracy is just a group of people planning something secret. That's all. All it takes is two or more people planning something in secret.
Okay.
So I don't think a conspiracy. I don't think you can define it as something that's necessarily is true or isn't true. I think it could be either way.
So yeah, it's like a truth.
So I think that's kind of, I guess, the difference between a conspiracy and a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Because a conspiracy theory, you're looking at things that happen, and then you're attributing them to these conspiracies that you're, making up in your head or you think are happening. But a conspiracy itself is something that is very real and happens all the time.
So it depends more about the context and the people directly involved rather than just the act or the theory behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of. Right. So bring up an example for you in a certain case, because I know you're more well versed in this than I am, of a conspiracy that maybe started as something that was like so unbelievable most people wouldn't believe it, obviously, and then kind of gave a little truth to it. You could go into the 9/11 example or something else, or anything that you can kind of that maybe you could relate to people who are like, oh, this is just a bunch of BS. Like, hey, like think about there's like something there.
Well, that's kind of how I feel about the moon landing these days. I'd say I'm 99% sure that it happened, but here's the thing with the moon landing is that if you look at the political context of when the moon landing happened, the Russians were kicking our ass in the space race through all the 50s and the 60s. And then Kennedy says, okay, now we're going to make it to the moon by the end of the 60s, and then he dies. He's like the sacrificial lamb, which is another conspiracy, but we won't go into that. And then suddenly, magically, in 1969, we land on the moon, and it's like, how did we secretly, overcome all these years and years of the Russians beating us? Which, of course, the reason they were beating us was that they were putting, ridiculous percentages of their GDP towards their space program and starving all their people,
throwing animals up there, and they were dying. And they just didn't care. They just wanted to get out.
Yeah, their space program wasn't bound by the same ethical restraints that ours is.
Yeah.
Well, ours claims to be.
Yeah,
but, so the more I think about it, the more, obviously we've been to the moon. So we've claimed to have gone to the moon several times. I believe we've been to the moon at least one time, but the original moon landing, there's enough kind of circumstantial evidence that puts a seed of doubt in my mind. And originally when I started looking into the moon landing, I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. Like, of course it landed on the moon.
Yeah.
There's so many people who remember watching it on TV in school and stuff like that. But just because a bunch of people watched it on TV doesn't mean that it actually happened.
Yeah. Dang. It's like by the very nature of phrasing a situation that way, it's like cast that doubt in your mind, where even if you're like, yeah, of course that didn't happen, you think like, well, dang, maybe it did. Like,
we're raised in a culture of American exceptionalism, so like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, we made it on the moon first. So you came in, my whole life I was like, yeah, we did that. I was proud of that, and now that I see, I like to think I see things in a more global context. I'm like, okay, well, our government's been doing scumbaggy things for its entire existence, and I can see us faking the moon landing, even if we weren't quite ready for that, just as kind of a political stunt, not just towards our own people. Like, that doesn't even have to be in a sinister way. It could just be intimidating the Russians, which I guess it worked. But
yeah, exactly. I mean, in the Cold War back then too, it was like who was going to press the button first. So if they keep making these different moves, then that's how they kind of kept the peace, or kept us ahead versus them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you wouldn't consider in that context, but like the way you phrase it too made it a lot more, I guess, accessible to people who would think, just brush it aside as something not important.
Well, at one point that really sold me on, believing in the moon landing and 9/11 as conspiracies and stuff like that, is people say, for a conspiracy like that to happen, you'd have to have, 100,000 people all keeping a secret at the same time.
Yeah, and they couldn't have any, misgivings or something, or mess it up, because one person messes it up, then the whole thing blows up.
Which originally you think is ridiculous, but I can give you a very well-known government conspiracy that hundreds of thousands of people kept secret for a long time. The Manhattan Project.
That's true.
The Manhattan Project was kept secret by a lot of people for a very long time.
Yeah.
So it is. I think our government is very much capable of finding ways to, do something sinister, like create a bomb that we're going to drop on Japan, and find a way to, whether that's through manipulating people through the, idea of patriotism, or just brute force or whatever, finding a way to keep people quiet. That's definitely something that's happened before and could happen again.
Do you think?
It probably is happening right now. We'll find out 50 years from now.
Yeah, true, but do you think, like, even example for like the prison project and stuff with the NSA, like they kept that secret for as long as they could, but do you think with the information age and stuff and how the internet has kind of like bridged that gap, that it's a lot more difficult? And I don't think governments and stuff can rely on those means of keeping the doors shut, in a sense, because anybody could just blow it open with leaking something, Edward Snowden, for example, or you could go down the line. Like, it seems a lot more difficult to maintain that kind of like backdoor secret group of people that can just say whatever and do what they want.
Yeah, that's true. And also, in the 40s, having a government job was a valuable thing, because back in those days, the government could do anything better than any private industry.
That's
and
true.
people recognize that. They're like, our government's the it's the greatest corporation in the world. But now we're like, our government's run by it's either run by these corporations, or it's just a scumbaggy corporation.
It's just not giving you what you want, kind of.
Yeah, people don't trust the government like they did in the 1940s. So
yeah, I think that's a good thing. I think a healthy level of skepticism with that kind of stuff, or even the backdoor conspiracy kind of things, make for a better social dynamic, rather than just having this one overbearing company, corporation, however you want to view it. But it still leaves,
especially when we have we have this climate of things like the Iraq War, that we just there is no good way to explain the Iraq War.
Yeah.
So everyone at some point has thought, has faced the fact that we went to this war, and literally not a single person can give a good reason why we did it.
Yeah. I mean, hindsight's always 20/20, but at the same time too, that was just kind of just a complete lapse of judgment. That wasn't even a conspiracy, or. Well, I mean, we went in there too to do other things rather than just look for WMD and try to destabilize kind of the whole regime there too, that we put into power, of course, too. Or even the CIA and stuff, and propping up all these dictators and stuff too. Those are kind of like conspiracies and things, so, and all the coups they start.
Yeah, but that regime that we toppled had nothing to do with 9/11, and everyone knew that.
No, I agree. Yeah. I can thank George Bush for that one.
Yeah. Or we can thank Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, more likely.
All the neocons, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. So, is there a difference too between like fabrication and conspiracy too? I know what you talked about when you said conspiracy before and defined it earlier was more like, apart from truth, a truth, however you want to define it too. But is there an like a element of like hyperbole or fabrication stuff that has to go into this mindset that makes it more believable and kind of gives life to the conspiracy, rather than it's just a bunch of crazy details that are kind of unbelievable? Like the way I would kind of consider it too is like you have to have that element of your mind open to begin with, or you kind of not necessarily want these things to be true, but you want to have that insider information. You want to be the one on the know. And then that way you can establish a line between you and others. Like, I have this information. I know what's really going on. And you're just kind of on the outside. You're kind of like, the brainwashed mass.
Well, that's kind of how Alex Jones built the whole InfoWars empire,
That's
right?
true, yeah.
just
No, I
kind of
agree.
selling himself as having this special knowledge, and only people in the know are on this website and doing these things, and not listening to the mainstream media.
Yeah.
That's definitely a way for people to get power.
Yeah, and it's just, well, obviously, like, it's a very financially, I don't know if stable position to be in, but if you can convince people that, like, you need these products, or because he sells, like, supplements and stuff like that too, like, or water purifiers for when, the apocalypse happens, like, that's an easy way to kind of keep your customer base probably going. I mean, it's a little bit of fear mongering, obviously, but it's also just like, oh, I have this stuff that's, going to be better than them. And it's just kind of just a different deviation from that aspect.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's kind of the weapon in which we fight wars now in the information age, is how many followers can I get, how many people can I get to subscribe to my beliefs and get on board, because the more people you have, the more power you have.
Yeah. But people even say too, just social media in general is like a way of engineering or a conspiracy, if you will, of like keeping us, glued on something like that too while people do other things. Stuff, or like they'll throw a media story and stuff and grab all your attention, because I just heard that too with the whole like Kavanaugh thing, and then it was just like, oh, they passed something with an expansion on the Patriot Act in the past week and nobody knew about it because they were running these different cycles. So that's kind of like, it's like, look here, not there. There's also an element of that too in that mindset.
Or Russian propaganda farms will throw anti-Hillary memes at people until they elect Trump.
I think, yeah.
Which happened.
Yeah, I mean, the way those wars are fought now too are definitely kind of like who can throw the most flack, in a way.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's somewhat true, but at the same time, you've seen how the left has tried to throw they've tried fighting that fight by just throwing flack at the Trump administration, and it clearly hasn't done anything.
Yeah. I think I feel like you really have to. I don't know how you could necessarily not be entangled or something, especially in our age too, with all the different stories. People can put anything they want up on the internet and stuff, and if you're in the right place at the right time, or you have similar beliefs that kind of confirm that bias and stuff too, how do you exactly, like, what can we do objective-wise, like objectively speaking, to maybe see like, okay, there's these elements in a conspiracy that like make sense, for example, and these other ones too that obviously there's something like kind of BS about it. Like, what is there a way to like really tell if a conspiracy has like any merit to it, or if it's just complete bullshit?
Well, I don't think there is a way to know 100%.
Okay, fair enough.
I think you just kind of make your own decisions and be confident in your beliefs. And if you're going to believe something, you should be able to defend it.
Back it up. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and then you get the whole tribalism kind of thing with, I mean, that's the whole politic divide, cultural divide, however you want to do it, religious versus non-religious divide too, which kind of leads itself, I don't know, like you would say, from other conspiracies and stuff like that too, if you define them that way.
People just need to do their own research. Like if you're gonna believe that Pizzagate was a giant sham, but then not have ever looked into Podesta's emails or his art collection, I mean, you're not doing yourself any favors.
Yeah. Or like that element too, with, if we're gonna go back to the government aspect too, with like the false flags, kind of like what I was mentioning before, like look here, not there. And there's like obviously examples of that throughout our history where they kind of had to do that in the sense too to get all that public opinion in one way or the other too, while they were actually doing what they had to.
Yeah, and the example people always go back to is the Nazi. Well, what did they do? They burned down like they burned down some courthouse. Like the Nazi Party did as like a false flag operation to get people mad at the Jews.
Okay, yeah, well, all that kind of stuff too. Yeah.
That's the one that people continually go back to as like a classic false flag operation, but it happens all the time. And governments all over do shit like that.
Yeah. It's weird too, especially in a society like this where you feel like the people have most of the power because they can drive the consumerist economy, they can vote, they can have the representatives and stuff like that too. And then you realize like maybe there's not as much control as we thought, and maybe that's just how it is. I don't know how to like divorce that from the reality in the sense of like, oh, you just live your daily life and it seems unimpeded, it doesn't seem like you're being overbeared or anything like that too, but like what kind of box are you living in, like in the middle, and you just can't go outside those lines. And that's kind of what conspiracies offers, like a way to get outside of those boundaries.
Well, at the same time, the people who are really into conspiracy theories and they get really paranoid, they end up creating their own box for themselves. Where now, they can't trust anything, so they can't even leave their house. Yeah. Or like, that guy just this week who he booby-trapped his whole house because he knew FBI agents were going to search it, and he was like, oh, they're going to find my secrets. You're just some crazy dude who lives in the desert. Like, what are you trying to hide? What do you think they're coming here to find? Or there was a guy in South Carolina who shot 7 cops who came to his door, and he was bragging about how good a marksman he was. He's like, I'm not going to let the government take my guns. People they create this box where everyone's out to get them and the things they love.
Yeah.
That's just not a healthy way to live. No,
too, and then in that way, too, then you have no overlap between... Like, that's kind of what the point I was trying to mainly make, is that you could find some kind of overlap between, like, that conspiracy theory mindset or the specific stories or details and what everybody else considers reality, or what is reality, however you want to objectify that. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like the only way to communicate back and forth, because if not, then you're just like one camp here, one camp there, and there's no overlap.
Yeah. I feel like a really important piece is if you're gonna have a base level of distrust in the authorities, you have to realize that most law enforcement or government officials, they're just normal people trying to live their lives. Exactly. And that's the job that they have.
No, I agree 100%.
If there is a conspiracy and there's a plot going on, it's people at the top who know about it, and through security clearances and information control, they find ways to get normal, well-meaning people to carry out their plots. So you can't get in this zone where you think everyone's out to get you, because most people aren't out to get you. It's only a crazy psychopaths with a lot of money who might be out to get you,
or have the ability to get you,
or they don't care about you personally. They're just out to get people in general. So
they just have to make money. No, I agree with that. And it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe those people with those mindsets gravitate towards the top in a sense, rather than just the lay people.
Yeah.
Just slave away and build a machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a pretty good place to stop. I want to thank my friend Ben again for being on the podcast. We'll do it again sometime soon. Episode 5, Conspiracies and Consciousness, and we'll catch you later.